The classroom was cold. It was always cold on Station Helix 9, but today it felt different. Maybe it was the size of the room. The holographic simulation theater could hold 300 students, and today every seat was filled. Park. Junho sat in the back row, as he always did. He was a small man with tired eyes and hands that never seemed to stop moving. He would tap his fingers on his desk, twist his pen, or simply stare at his palms like they held some secret only he could see. The other cadets barely noticed him. He was just another human in a sea of aliens, and humans were still new to the galaxy. They were tolerated, sometimes respected, but never truly seen as equals. Beside him sat Yuna, the only person at the academy who called him a friend. She was loud where he was quiet, brave where he was careful. She nudged his arm and whispered, "You look like you haven't slept in days." Junho gave her a small smile. "I'm fine." He was not fine. At the front of the room, Instructor Wellness stood like a tower of black armor. The Rithani were insect-like beings, 7 feet tall with 4 arms and eyes that reflected light like broken mirrors. Wellness was old, even by Rithani standards, and had seen more wars than most species had fought. When he spoke, his voice clicked and hummed like machinery. "Today," Wellness announced, "we study the Battle of Kravis Station." A murmur ran through the room. Even Junho, who had been staring at his desk, looked up. His face went pale. Yuna leaned toward him. "Hey, you okay? You look sick." "I'm fine," he said again. His voice was barely a whisper. The lights dimmed, and the center of the room came alive with light. Holographic images filled the space, showing a massive space station surrounded by stars. It was beautiful in a cold metal way. Then the images changed. Ships appeared, hundreds of them, but they were not normal ships. They were twisted, organic, covered in teeth and claws and things that should not exist. "The Void Swarm," Wellness said. "Mindless, hungry. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They only consume." The simulation showed the battle beginning. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. Soldiers fought in hallways filled with smoke and blood. The cadets watched in silence, some with excitement, others with fear. Orn, the Zari noble with blue skin and 4 arms, laughed softly. "Primitive tactics," he said to his friends. "Humans and their messy wars." A few aliens laughed with him. Junho said nothing. His hands had stopped moving. They were pressed flat against his desk. Trembling. The simulation moved inside the station, showing the chaos of the ground battle. Soldiers screamed. Walls collapsed. And then the image focused on a single location, Medical Bay 7. "This," Wellness said, his voice heavy, "is where the impossible happened." The room went quiet. Medical Bay 7 was cut off from the rest of the station for 18 hours. 200 soldiers were trapped inside with limited supplies. No communication, and the Void Swarm breaking through the walls. Wellness paused. According to all military logic, everyone inside should have died. The hologram showed the medical bay. It was a nightmare of broken equipment, wounded soldiers, and blood on every surface. But they did not all die, Wellness continued. When rescue teams finally reached Medical Bay 7, they found 147 survivors. 147 soldiers who should have been dead, kept alive by a single medic. The cadets leaned forward in their seats. Even Oren looked interested now. Who was the medic? Someone asked. Wellness made a sound that might have been a sigh. The records are classified. We know only that it was a human, newly certified, on their first deployment. They had no combat experience. They had no special training. They were, by all accounts, completely unprepared for what happened. Then how did they do it? Another cadet asked. That, Wellness said, is what we are here to learn. The medic improvised treatments for 12 different species using station chemicals. They performed surgeries they had never trained for. They fought alongside the soldiers when the swarm broke through. And they did not stop. For 18 hours, they did not stop. The room was silent. Even the aliens who had laughed at humans earlier said nothing. Orange spoke up, his voice no longer mocking. Surely this medic was promoted, decorated. They must be famous now. Wellness shook his head. The medic refused all recognition. They asked for their identity to remain hidden. No one knows who they are or where they are now. The cadets began to whisper among themselves. Who could this person be? A secret hero? A legend hiding in plain sight? Yuna turned to Junho to make a joke, but the words died in her throat. Junho was not moving. He was not breathing. His face was white as snow, and his eyes were fixed on the hologram of Medical Bay 7 like he was seeing ghosts. Junho? She whispered. What's wrong? He did not answer. He could not answer, because in the hologram, frozen in time, was a young man with trembling hands and blood on his uniform. A young man who looked exactly like him. Junho stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, and the sound was loud in the quiet room. Every eye turned to him. Wellness tilted his massive head. Cadet Park? Do you have something to say? Junho's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at the hologram. He looked at Yuna. He looked at his own shaking hands. And then, in a voice so quiet it was almost lost, he spoke. I was the medic there. The room went completely silent. 300 cadets stared at the small, tired human in the back row. The human no one had ever noticed. The human who sat alone and never spoke about his past. Oren laughed nervously. That's impossible. You're just a bah. I was there, Junho said, louder this time. His voice cracked. Medical Bay 7. 18 hours. I was the medic. No one laughed now. No one spoke. They only stared at the quiet man who carried a war inside his chest. And Junho stared back, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. 3 years ago, Kravis Station was the brightest place in the sector. It was a city in space, home to 50,000 people from dozens of species. It had gardens and markets and children playing in the corridors. It was safe. It was peaceful. And then the Void Swarm came. Junho was 21 years old when he arrived at Kravis Station. He had been a medic for exactly 47 days. His hands shook every time he touched a patient. His voice trembled every time he gave an order. He was not ready for war. He was barely ready for anything. On his first day, he dropped a medical kit in front of his entire unit. The supplies scattered across the floor, and his face turned red with shame. Some soldiers laughed. Others looked away in disappointment. But one person did not laugh. Dr. Wellness was a Rathani field surgeon, tall and ancient and kind, in ways that Junho had never expected from an alien. He helped Junho pick up the supplies without saying a word. When they were done, he placed one of his 4 hands on Junho's shoulder. You are afraid, Dr. Wellness said. It was not a question. Junho nodded, unable to lie. Good, the old Rathani said. Fear keeps us careful. The soldiers who feel no fear are the first to die. He paused. You have good hands, young human. Steady hands. You simply need to trust them. Junho looked at his hands. They were still shaking. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted. Dr. Wellness made a clicking sound that might have been a laugh. No one ever does. We learn by doing. We grow by failing. You will make mistakes, young one. Patients will die because of choices you make. This is the truth of our work. His mirror-like eyes seemed to soften. But you will also save lives. Many lives. And that is worth the pain. Junho wanted to believe him. He wanted to be the person Dr. Wellness saw in him, He never got the chance to find out. The Void Swarm attacked on a Tuesday. Junho was in Medical Bay 7, practicing stitches on a dummy when the first explosion hit. The station shook so hard that he fell to the ground. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed. And then the screaming started, not alarms. People. Dr. Velness ran past him, shouting orders. All medical staff to emergency stations. Prepare for mass casualties. Junho followed, his legs moving on their own. The hallways were chaos. Soldiers ran in every direction. Smoke filled the air. And through the smoke, Junho saw something that would haunt him forever. The Void Swarm were not like anything he had imagined. They were not ships or robots or soldiers. They were alive, twisted combinations of flesh and metal, with too many teeth and too many eyes. They poured through the broken walls like water, killing everything in their path. Junho froze. His feet would not move. His hands would not stop shaking. He stood there, watching the monsters tear through his fellow soldiers, and he did nothing. A hand grabbed his arm. Sergeant Beak Taiho, a human soldier with gray hair and scars on his face, pulled him behind a barricade. "Move, kid," Taiho shouted. "We need to fall back to Medical Base 7. Junho ran. He did not think. He did not feel. He just ran. They made it to Medical Bay 7 with dozens of others. Soldiers, doctors, engineers, civilians. All of them wounded. All of them terrified. The blast doors sealed behind them with a heavy clang, and suddenly they were trapped. "Communications are down," someone reported. "We can't reach anyone outside. How long until rescue?" Lieutenant Sujin asked. She was the ranking officer now. A calm woman with steady eyes. Unknown. Could be hours. Could be days. Junho looked around the medical bay. It was filled with wounded soldiers. Humans, Dasari, Rathani, and species he did not even recognize. They were bleeding, crying, dying. And there were only 2 medical staff to help them all. Dr. Velness was already working, his 4 hands moving faster than Junho could follow. "Junho," he called. "I need you on triage. Sort the wounded by priority." Junho ran to help. For the next hour, he moved through the wounded, deciding who could wait and who needed help now. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, looking into the eyes of a dying soldier and telling them they had to wait, seeing the fear in their faces, knowing that some of them would not survive the hour. And then the Void Swarm broke through. A section of the wall collapsed, and 3 of the creatures poured into the medical bay. Soldiers opened fire. The noise was deafening. Junho dropped to the ground, covering his ears, unable to move. He heard Dr. Velness shout something. He looked up just in time to see the old Rathani throw himself in front of a wounded soldier. The void creature's claw went through his chest. Time stopped. Dr. Velness fell slowly, his mirror eyes finding Junho across the room. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His 4 hands reached toward Junho, trembling, and then went still. The soldiers killed the creatures. The breach was sealed. But Dr. Velness was dead. Junho crawled to his body. He held the old wreath in his hand, cold and heavy, and felt something break inside his chest. His mentor, his teacher, the only person who believed in him, gone. "Kid." Sergeant Taiho's voice cut through the fog in Junho's mind. "Kid, look at me." Junho looked up. Taiho's face was hard, but his eyes were not unkind. "The doctor's gone," Taiho said. "You're all we've got now. These people are going to die if you don't help them." Junho shook his head. "I can't. I'm not ready." "I don't know how." Taiho grabbed his shoulders and shook him hard. "Nobody's ever ready. But you're here, and they need you. So get up and do your job." Junho looked at the wounded. 200 pairs of eyes stared back at him. Humans, aliens, all of them waiting. All of them hoping. All of them trusting a 21-year-old boy who had been a medic for 47 days. He looked at his hands. They were covered in Dr. Velnus's blood. They were still shaking, but they were all he had. Junho stood up. His legs were weak. His voice cracked, but he stood up. "Everyone who can move," he said. "Bring me the wounded, now." The soldiers obeyed. They did not see a scared boy. They saw the only medic they had. They saw Hope and Junho, terrified and broken and completely unprepared, began to work. He did not know it then, but he would not stop for 18 hours. The first 3 hours were the worst. Or maybe they only felt that way because Junho still had the energy to feel. 183 wounded. 12 different species. One medic with 47 days of training. The numbers were impossible. The situation was hopeless. And yet Junho moved through the medical bay like a man possessed, his bloody hands never stopping, his tired voice never silent. "You, pressure on that wound. Don't let go. Bring me the blue kit, the one with the Vasari symbol. I need light here. Someone hold this light steady." He did not know the names of half the patients. He did not know the proper treatments for most of the alien species. He worked from memory, from guesswork, from pure desperate instinct. And somehow, impossibly, people stopped dying. A Vasari soldier named Kira lay on one of the tables, her blue skin pale from blood loss. She had 4 arms like all her kind, but 2 of them hung useless, shattered by the Void Swarm's attack. When Junho approached her, she laughed weakly. "A human child playing doctor?" she said. "I would rather die than die quietly," Junho interrupted. He did not have time for pride. He did not have time for anything except saving lives. "Or let me work and live." "Your choice." Kira stared at him with wide eyes. No one had ever spoken to a Vasari noble like that. But before she could respond, Junho was already cutting away the dead tissue from her arms, his movements quick and sure. She screamed. He kept working. 20 minutes later, her bleeding had stopped and her arms were wrapped in clean bandages. "You might lose some movement," Junho said, already moving to the next patient. "But you'll live." Kira watched him go, something strange in her eyes. Respect, maybe. Or just shocked by our 4. The medical supplies began to run out. Junho stared at the empty shelves, his mind racing. He had 30 patients who needed pain medication. He had none left. He had 12 patients who needed blood transfusions. The blood packs were empty. He had soldiers dying from infections he could not treat because the antibiotics were gone. "What do we do?" asked Donghae, a young human private who had become Junho's assistant. Both of Donghae's legs were crushed, useless, but he refused to stop helping. He dragged himself across the floor, organizing supplies, comforting patients, doing everything he could with just his arms. Junho closed his eyes. He thought about his training. He thought about Dr. Velnus. He thought about every chemistry class he had slept through in school. "The station's maintenance room," he said suddenly. "It should have industrial chemicals. Some of them can be converted into basic medications." "That's insane," someone said. "Yes," Junho agreed. "But it's all we have." He spent the next 2 hours mixing chemicals in containers that were never meant for medical use. He created painkillers that tasted like poison but worked. He synthesized antibiotics that were crude but effective. He made blood substitutes that would only last a few hours but would keep patients alive long enough. It was not good medicine. It was barely medicine at all. But it was enough. By hour 9, the Void Swarm attacked again. They came through a weak point in the wall, their twisted bodies squeezing through gaps that should have been too small. The soldiers formed a defensive line, but they were tired, wounded, running low on ammunition. "We can't hold them." Lieutenant Sujin shouted. Junho was in the middle of surgery. A Ridhani soldier lay on his table, chest open, heart exposed. He could not stop, but he could hear the creatures getting closer. He could hear soldiers screaming. He could hear the line breaking. "Keep pressure here," he told Donghae, placing the private's hands on the patient's chest. Then he grabbed a rifle from a dead soldier and ran toward the fighting. He was not a warrior. He had never killed anything in his life. But the creatures were coming for his patients, and he would not let them. Junho fired into the mass of twisted flesh and metal. He did not aim well. He did not need to. The creatures were everywhere. He just pulled the trigger until the rifle clicked empty, then grabbed another one and kept shooting. When the attack finally ended, Junho stood in a pile of dead monsters, covered in blood that was not his own. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the rifle. But the patients were safe. He walked back to the surgery table, picked up his tools, and continued operating. He did not wash the blood off his hands. There was no time. By hour 13, Junho could no longer feel his legs. He had been standing for over half a day. His body was screaming for rest, for food, for water. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces. The faces of patients who had died because he was too slow, too tired, too inexperienced. 53 faces now. 53 people he could not save. He started talking to Dr. Velmus. The old Rithani was not there, of course. He was dead, his body covered with a sheet in the corner of the medical bay. But Junho talked to him anyway. "I don't know what I'm doing," he whispered. "I'm just guessing. I'm making mistakes. People are dying because of me." In his exhausted mind, he could almost hear Dr. Velmus respond. "You will make mistakes. Patients will die. But you will also save lives. Many lives." Junho kept working. By hour 16, Sergeant Taiho died. The old soldier had been hiding his wound, a piece of metal lodged deep in his stomach. By the time Junho found out, it was too late. The internal bleeding had gone too far. Junho held Taiho's hand as the life faded from his eyes. "You did good, kid," Taiho whispered. "You did real good." "I'm sorry," Junho said. Tears ran down his face, cutting lines through the blood and dirt. "I should have checked you earlier. I should have." "Stop." Taiho's grip tightened weakly. "You saved so many. Don't you dare apologize." He took a shuddering breath. "Get them out of here. All of them. Promise me." "I promise," Junho said. Taiho smiled. Then his hand went limp. Junho closed the sergeant's eyes, stood up, and went back to work. By hour 18, the rescue teams finally arrived. They cut through the blast doors with plasma torches, expecting to find a room full of corpses. Instead, they found 147 survivors. Humans, the Sari, Rithani, all of them alive. All of them looking at a single figure in the center of the room. Junho was on his knees beside a patient, still working, still trying to stop the bleeding. His hands moved automatically, even though his mind was barely conscious. His eyes were empty. His body was broken, but his hands never stopped. "Medical team," someone shouted. "We need medics in here now." Junho felt hands pulling him away from the patient. He tried to fight them. He tried to keep working. But his body finally gave out, and darkness took him. The last thing he heard was someone asking, "How many did we lose?" And in the darkness, Junho counted the faces. 53. He had lost 53. He never forgot that number. Not for a single day. The classroom was still silent. 300 cadets stared at Junho like he had just told them the stars were fake. Even Instructor Wellness, who had seen 100 wars, seemed frozen. Orin was the first to speak. The Dazari noble stood up, his forearms crossed over his chest. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You expect us to believe that you, a nobody who sits in the back and never speaks, are the legendary medic of Kravis Station. Prove it." Junho did not move. He did not speak. He just stood there, looking smaller than ever, like the weight of his own words was crushing him. "Silence," Instructor Wellness said. His voice clicked and hummed, but there was something different in it now. Something like recognition. "I will verify this claim." He turned to the console and entered a series of commands. The holographic display changed, showing classified military files. Codes flashed across the screen, locks opening one after another. And then a face appeared. It was Junho, 3 years younger, but unmistakably him. The file showed his name, his rank, his deployment history. And at the bottom, in red letters that pulsed like a heartbeat, classified Kravis Station. Survivor Medal of Valor refused. The room erupted. Cadets shouted questions. Some demanded to know why he had hidden this. Others wanted to hear the full story. A few just stared, unable to process what they were seeing. Orin's face had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. He sat down slowly, his 4 hands gripping the edge of his desk. "Enough." Wellness raised one of his 4 arms, and the room went quiet. "Cadet Park, you have the floor. Explain, if you wish." Junho finally looked up. His eyes were red, his face pale. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. "I don't know what to explain," he said. "I was there. I did what I had to do. People still died. 147 survived," Wellness said. 53 didn't. Junho's voice cracked. "I remember every single one of them. I remember their faces, their names. The moment they stopped breathing while I was too busy saving someone else." He took a shaky breath. "Heroes save everyone. I didn't. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who happened to be there." The room was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not shock. Something deeper. Something like understanding. Wellness walked toward Junho, his massive form moving with surprising gentleness. "You are dismissed from today's lesson," he said quietly. "But know this, Cadet Park. What you did was not luck. It was not accident. It was courage. The fact that you feel guilt for those you lost only proves that you are exactly the kind of person we need in this galaxy." Junho said nothing. He gathered his things and walked out of the room, leaving 300 cadets to stare at the door that closed behind him. That night, Yuna found him on the observation deck. It was the quietest place on the station. A small balcony with a window that showed the endless darkness of space. Junho stood there alone, watching the stars, his hands pressed against the cold glass. "You could have told me," Yuna said. Her voice was angry, but underneath the anger was hurt. 2 years, Junho. 2 years we've been friends, and you never said a word." "I know." His voice was barely a whisper. "Why?" She walked to stand beside him, her reflection joining his in the glass. "Did you think I would treat you differently? Did you think I thought you would look at me the way everyone else does now." Junho turned to face her. His eyes were red, like he had been crying. "Like I'm something special. Something great. But I'm not, Yuna. I'm just someone who got lucky. Someone who made 1,000 mistakes and watched 53 people die because of them." Yuna stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "You're an idiot," she said. Junho blinked. "What? An idiot?" She stepped closer, her voice rising. "You didn't lose 53 people, Junho. You saved 147. 147 soldiers who would have died without you, who went home to their families. who were alive right now because a scared 21-year-old refused to give up. But, no. She grabbed his shoulders and forced him to look at her. I know you carry those 53 with you. I know you see their faces. But you don't get to ignore the 147. They matter too. Their lives matter too. Junho's eyes filled with tears. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. Yuna's voice softened. Why did you come to the academy, Junho? Why are you here? He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. I wanted to learn, he said. I wanted to be better, stronger, smarter, so that next time I could save more. So that next time I wouldn't have to watch anyone die. Then stop hiding. Yuna let go of his shoulders, but stayed close. Stop pretending you're nobody. You have experience that none of us have. Knowledge that could save lives. And you're wasting it because you're afraid of being seen. Junho looked at her. For the first time in 3 years, something shifted in his eyes. Not hope, exactly, but something close. I don't know if I can, he admitted. You don't have to do it alone. Yuna smiled. That's what friends are for. The next morning, Junho returned to class. The other cadets watched him differently now. Some with awe, some with respect, a few still with doubt. But Junho walked to his seat in the back row with his head held just a little higher. Instructor Wellness began the lesson, but halfway through, he paused. Cadet Park, he said, would you be willing to share your perspective on this battle? Your first-hand experience would be valuable. Every eye turned to Junho. He felt his old fear rising, the urge to disappear, to be invisible again. But then he saw Yuna nodding at him. He saw Oren, the arrogant noble, looking at him with something like hope. He saw 300 cadets waiting to learn from someone who had survived the impossible. Junho stood up. I can try, he said. And for the first time in 3 years. He began to tell his story. When the class ended, Oren approached Junho in the hallway. The Dazari noble moved slowly, almost hesitantly, his forearms held close to his body in what Junho recognized as a gesture of humility. I spoke wrongly before, Oren said. About humans? About you. I was arrogant and blind. Junho shook his head. You didn't know. That is no excuse. Oren straightened and then did something that made Junho's breath catch. He placed all 4 of his hands over his heart, the Dazari gesture of deepest respect. You have my honor, Cadet Park, today and always. Junho did not know what to say, so he simply bowed his head in return. It was not forgiveness. It was not healing, but it was a start. 1 year passed faster than Junho expected. The academy had changed for him after that day in the simulation room. He was no longer the quiet boy in the back row. Cadets approached him with questions. Instructors asked for his perspective. Even the aliens who had once dismissed humans now treated him as an equal. It was strange. Uncomfortable, sometimes. But Junho was learning to accept it. Today was graduation day. The Grand Hall of Station Helix 9 was filled with thousands of beings from across the galaxy. Families, officers, diplomats, all gathered to watch the newest soldiers receive their commissions. Flags from 100 worlds hung from the ceiling, and the air hummed with excitement and pride. Junho stood backstage, adjusting his uniform for the 100th time. His hands were shaking again. Some things never changed. You're going to be fine. Yuna appeared beside him, already dressed in her engineering corps uniform. She looked different now, more confident, more sure of herself. The academy had changed her too. Easy for you to say, Junho muttered. You're not giving a speech. Yuna laughed. You survived 18 hours against the Void Swarm, and you're scared of a speech? The Void Swarm didn't judge my public speaking. She punched his arm lightly. Just be yourself. Tell them what matters. Before Junho could respond, a voice called his name. An officer approached with a small box in his hands. Inside, resting on velvet, was a metal Junho had never seen before. It was gold and silver, shaped like a star, with words engraved around the edge that Junho could not read. "The Distinguished Service Cross," the officer said. "You are the first human to receive this honor at the Galactic Union Military Academy. Congratulations, Cadet Park." Junho stared at the medal. 3 years ago, he had refused all recognition. 3 years ago, he wanted nothing but to forget. But things were different now. "Thank you," he said, and meant it. The ceremony began. One by one, cadets walked across the stage to receive their commissions. Orin went early, his blue skin bright under the lights, his forearms raised in a gesture of triumph. The crowd cheered. Even Junho smiled. Then his name was called. He walked to the podium on legs that felt like water. The crowd was enormous, thousands of faces watching him. He saw Yuna in the front row, giving him a thumbs up. He saw Instructor Velnus standing with the other faculty, his mirror eyes unreadable. He saw aliens and humans side by side, waiting to hear what he would say. Junho took a breath and began. "I was not supposed to be here today," he said. His voice was quiet, but the microphones carried it across the hall. 3 years ago, I was a medic who had no business being on a battlefield. I was scared, unprepared, completely certain that I would fail. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But I did not fail, not because I was brave or smart or special. I survived because I refused to stop. Even when I was exhausted, even when I was terrified, even when everything told me it was hopeless. He looked out at the crowd. That is what it means to be human. We are not the strongest species. We are not the smartest. We are not the fastest or the oldest or the most advanced. But we do not stop. No matter how hard things get, we keep going. The hall was silent. Every eye was fixed on him. "I want to tell you about the people who saved me that day," Junho continued. Dr. Velnus, a Rathani surgeon who believed in me when I did not believe in myself. Sergeant Beak Taiho, a human soldier who reminded me of my duty when I wanted to give up. Private Donghae, who crawled on broken legs to help others. And the 53 soldiers who died despite everything I did. His voice cracked slightly on the last words, but he pushed through. I carry them with me every day. Not as a burden, but as a reminder. A reminder of why we do this. Why we train, why we fight, why we sacrifice. Not for glory, not for medals, but for the people who are counting on us. He lifted his head, his eyes shining. So to my fellow graduates, I say this. You will face impossible situations. You will make mistakes. You will lose people you care about. But you will also save lives. You will make a difference. And that is worth everything. He stepped back from the podium. For a moment, there was silence. Then the applause began. It started with Yuna, standing up in the front row, clapping as hard as she could. Then Oren joined her, all 4 hands beating together. Then the rest of the hall, thousands of beings rising to their feet, filling the air with a sound like thunder. Junho stood there, overwhelmed, tears running down his face. He had finally said the words he had kept inside for 3 years. And the galaxy had listened. The ceremony ended. But the day was not over. Alarms screamed across the station just as the graduates were leaving the hall. Red lights flashed. Officers ran through the corridors, shouting orders. Something was wrong. Training Vessel 7 has suffered catastrophic failure, the announcement said. 40 cadets are trapped aboard. Hull breach in progress. Rescue teams are being assembled. Junho did not hesitate. I'm going, he said to Yuna, already moving toward the shuttle bay. Wait. She ran after him. I'm coming too. Oren appeared beside them, his face determined. As am I. They reached the shuttle bay together. A rescue vessel was preparing to launch, its engines already warming. Junho ran up the ramp, flashing his credentials to the officer in charge. Cadet Park, you're not cleared for rescue operations. I'm a field medic with combat experience, Junho said. You need me. The officer hesitated, then nodded. Get on board. The shuttle launched into the darkness of space. Through the windows, Junho could see the damaged training vessel spinning slowly, fire and debris trailing from its hull. 40 cadets inside. 40 lives depending on them. In the corner of the shuttle, he noticed a young woman in a medic uniform. She was small, with dark hair and wide eyes that reminded Junho of himself 3 years ago. Her hands were shaking so badly that she could barely hold her medical kit. Her name tag read. Cadet Kim Hae-un. Junho walked over and knelt beside her. First rescue mission? He asked. She nodded, unable to speak. I know how you feel, Junho said. His voice was calm, gentle. I was just like you once. Scared, shaking, certain I would fail. Ham looked up at him, her eyes wet with tears. How did you stop being afraid? Junho smiled. It was a sad smile, but also a warm one. I didn't, he admitted. The fear never really goes away. But I learned to move anyway. To do the job even when my hands were shaking. To save the people I could, even knowing I might lose some. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone, Cadet. We'll do this together. Hae-un took a shaky breath. Some of the fear left her eyes. What if I make mistakes? She asked. You will, Junho said. We all do. But that's not what matters. He stood up, offering her his hand. What matters is that you keep trying. Keep fighting. Keep saving the ones you can. She took his hand and stood. The shuttle doors opened. Debris floated past, and the damaged vessel loomed before them. Junho could hear screams from inside. Cadets calling for help. He looked at his team. Yuna, ready with her engineering tools. Oren, armed and determined. Han, scared but standing tall. And Junho himself, no longer the broken boy from Medical Base 7. He was something more now. Something forged in pain and loss and hope. Let's go, he said. They moved into the wreckage together. Junho led the way, his medical kit in his hands, his heart steady. The galaxy had tried to break him. It had taken his mentor, his friends, his peace. But it had also given him something precious, purpose, connection. The knowledge that even the smallest person could make a difference. He was not a legend. He was not a hero. He was just a human who refused to stop. And in that moment, stepping into the darkness to save 40 lives. Junho finally understood what Dr. Wellness had meant all those years ago. This was worth the pain. This was worth everything. The rescue began.